Saturday night, about 10:30, we got a phone call from a girl I didn't know. She claimed to be Kylie's friend and said, "Don't panic. Your sister is at the Mayo. She had a stroke."
I think my first thought was that it was like, this is going to change her life, emotionally, physically, forever.
In 1978, a baby was born. Louise Brown, the world's first test tube baby, was ushered into the world, and with her, a new kind of science. In the past 35 years, in vitro fertilization has become almost mainstream.
How do I know it's working unless I check her ovaries? So that's why
Dr. Daniel Duffy has managed the egg donor program at the Florida Institute for Reproductive Medicine in Jacksonville for more than 2 decades.
You have a couple whose wife does not have sufficient egg quality to produce a pregnancy.
So I do have some in here.
He gives egg donors hormone injections to make them ovulate, then retrieves the eggs to fertilize and implant.
We don't want too many and we don't want too few.
And they got to be young, healthy, attractive. You want to be honest about it. I mean, that's what these parents are looking for. Intelligent.
Rufus Pennington is a Jacksonville lawyer representing 24-year-old Kylie Gilman in a rare case of international medical malpractice. In the United States, egg donors are paid for their time and trouble, anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000 per cycle. But in some countries, including Canada, it remains illegal to compensate donors.
When you have 2 countries with a huge border and you have opposite legal regimes on that issue across the border, this market has been created where these young ladies are brought across the international border, stimulated, in some cases obviously very excessively, and then sent home the same day. And that's what creates this substandard medical environment.
Under ordinary circumstances, a lawsuit like this wouldn't go very far.
You know, in Canada, there's not many remedies for medical malpractice.
But Kylie's case is unique. The doctor who retrieved her eggs flew to Florida on vacation the same day she returned home to Jacksonville.
Well, because he was in Florida when he called his patient who was in Florida, who was having symptoms in Florida, and he told her not to go to a Florida hospital, and she had a stroke in Florida.
That dreadful day.
But then that's when it hit me of how serious it was.
So we were watching her belly, you know, getting bigger and bigger, and just in the pain she was in. And
I looked like I was probably about 7 months pregnant.
Now we're worried about her ovaries flipping, her ovaries bursting, bleeding to death. Do we have to take them out?
Because they said her ovaries were like the size of grapefruits.
Fluid, she had liters of fluid constantly being taken out of her, liters.
Not knowing if the doctors were saying we don't know what's going to happen, if she's going to make it.
This was my at-home nurse kit that they had me.
Kylie Gilman decided to become an egg donor on her own and without her family's knowledge.
Yep, it's a free trip, and it's exciting. I get to help somebody, and you know, you get paid for it. I mean, the whole thing, it just sounded good and no risks.
A few months after signing up with Giving Hope, a Dallas-based egg donor website, she was selected by a childless family in Canada.
A lot of psychology questions and family genetic background questions, you know, religion, political views, I mean, everything.
In exchange for $5,500, she agreed to inject herself with hormones to make her ovulate, then travel to Toronto to have a doctor retrieve the eggs. While this process is generally simple, it comes with the risk of something called ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome.
That's what basically kept me in the hospital so long.
A rare but potentially very dangerous condition.
Yeah, so that's what was basically
Draining out of you?
Mm-hmm.
Early on, blood work showed Kylie was at risk.
Laboratory-wise, they knew that she was responding excessively from the testing that was done before the procedure.
But in the records it said I was kind of overstimulated, so they lowered my dosage.
But they didn't cancel the egg retrieval, even when it became clear that Kylie's egg production far exceeded safe levels.
Normal egg retrieval in that process is about 6 to 10 eggs. And then they had documented that he had taken 45.
And they took 45 eggs.
45 eggs.
Wow, that's a fairly large number of eggs.
This is a hyperstimulated cycle. So what happened was
Because collecting those eggs would almost certainly cause hyperstimulation syndrome, Dr. Duffy says his practice would never have proceeded with the retrieval.
These are all large cysts that got hyperstimulated. We would cancel the cycle.
But Kylie's doctor went ahead with the procedure and, despite the risks, sent her home that same day.
I started throwing up in the elevator, and then the rest is history. I mean, I was throwing up the whole way home, on the plane, in the terminal, my layover. I mean, it was bad. Very bad.
Kylie tried calling the doctor several times.
Every time that we would talk to him or anything, it was, no, you're fine, just drink Gatorade, you're okay, you're okay.
But things only got worse.
And I woke up or was conscious or something and went to grab for a water bottle and couldn't feel it. I saw me grabbing it, but I couldn't grab it.
On November 11th, 2011, Kylie was admitted to the Mayo Clinic, Jacksonville. 5 days later, before she was even discharged from the hospital, her egg donation check arrived.
I hated that money. I hated it. It's not worth it. Not worth it. Your body's not a price. There's no price.
I'm completely on my right side. Can't feel textures. Can't feel temperature. So I burn myself real easy.
While the visible signs have diminished, the effects of the stroke will be with Kylie forever. Kylie is clearly an outlier. Fewer than 1% of women experience the degree of hyperstimulation she did.
This is a healthy young lady who's...
And Dr. Duffy insists that if managed properly, that number should be 0.
With proper prevention and techniques of stimulation the way we have right now, I don't see why a donor should ever hyperstimulate again.
But as long as the cross-border trade in ovaries continues unregulated, Kylie and her family are determined to warn other young women to stay far away.
You know, I had this idea that it was grand and great, and I think the idea is good, but for someone to take advantage of that is just not okay.
The Canadian doctor in this case has not responded to the lawsuit, and he did not respond to our request for comment. Kylie's lawyers have attempted to sue the Dallas-based egg donor website, but the company has little money and no liability insurance.
So what should somebody consider who is considering being an egg donor?
Well, there's a number of safety concerns that you should take into account before donating eggs. So the experts we talked to said the best way is to make sure that you get proper care. Use a fertility clinic that screens and treats its own egg donors rather than going through a third-party site. Ask the doctor about their plan to prevent ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And finally, realize it's not a quick or necessarily easy procedure. It requires a considerable amount of time and does carry some risk.
Very interesting. Ann Chandler tonight. Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Sean.